Sometimes the most important question we'll ever ask is the simplest one. Not, where are you going, or what do you want, but may I stay? This is a story about two people who'd forgotten how to ask for anything until the night a stranger walked out of the darkness and into the light of a dying fire. It's about dignity found in unexpected places, about work that heals wounds deeper than any doctor can reach, and about the quiet courage it takes to let someone see you when you've spent years learning to hide. If you've ever felt alone in a crowded room, or if you've ever wondered whether kindness still matters in a hard world, this story is for you. The woman appeared at the edge of his firelight without warning. Caleb's hand went to his rifle instinct. Nothing more before he saw her clearly. Not a drifter. Not a threat. Just a woman standing at the boundary between dark and light. Carpetbag clutched against her chest like a shield. Her dress was torn at the hem. Hair escaped its pins in ways that spoke of miles, not mornings. She didn't stumble forward and didn't beg. Just stood there, waiting for permission to exist. "Can I sit by your fire?" Her voice carried across the space between them, steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Just until dawn." Caleb studied her the way he studied cattle, showing symptoms he couldn't name yet, looking for what was wrong. Not who was wrong. No wedding ring. But a white line on her finger where one used to be. No horse. Boots caked with alkali dust, 20 miles worth. Maybe more. He poured coffee into his spare tin cup, set it on the ground between them. She crossed into the firelight. If you're reading this from your porch tonight, or maybe sitting by your own fire somewhere under these same stars, we'd be grateful to know where you're from. Sometimes it's good to remember we're not alone out here. Caleb woke to the smell of cold ash and the sound of cattle shifting in the pre-dawn gray. The woman was still there. She sat upright, his red-striped blanket draped around her shoulders. He'd put it there sometime in the night. Couldn't remember exactly when. She stared at the dead coals. Her jaw worked like she was chewing words she couldn't spit out. He stood, knees cracked. The woman flinched but didn't look up. Caleb built the fire back without speaking, added mesquite from his dwindling pile, pulled out his iron skillet and the cornmeal sack. Bacon grease went in first. It hissed and popped. Then the mush. He stirred it with his wooden spoon worn smooth, on one side from his wife's hand. Years ago. The woman watched him now. Her fingers twisted to the blanket edge. "I was engaged." The words came out flat. "My father, he had debts. The groom's family wanted $200. Dowry. I couldn't—" Her voice caught. She swallowed hard. "They canceled the wedding. Day of, in front of everyone. The whole town. They said things. About what kind of woman doesn't bring anything to a marriage." Caleb scraped the mush onto 2 tin plates. The spoon scraped metal. "The landlady wouldn't let me back in my room. Said she couldn't have that sort staying under her roof." The woman's hand shook. "I walked. That's all I could do." He handed her a plate, set the molasses jar between them, ate 3 bites before he spoke. "Town's full of fools." She looked up then, eyes red-rimmed but dry. "I'm short a hand," Caleb said. Not meeting her gaze, he watched the cattle instead, counting silhouettes in the growing light. 4 weeks to the rail station in Hayes, $1 a day, meals included." He paused. "You know, livestock." Her throat moved, once, twice. "I grew up on a farm. Fair work for fair pay." He finally looked at her. "You do the job. You earn it. No exceptions." She nodded, fast. like she was afraid he'd take it back. Yes. Caleb returned to his breakfast, chewed, swallowed, realized he'd just hired a woman whose name he didn't even know, and she hadn't asked for his either. "Stay on the left flank," Caleb said, pointing at the outer edge of the herd. "Cattle drift that way when they're nervous. Old red brindles see her, the one with the white face. She bolts. Every time. Keep an eye on her." Clara nodded. Her borrowed mare shifted beneath her, slow and steady. The horse was older than most of the cattle, sway-backed and gentle, but it knew the work. "They'll tell you what they need if you watch," Caleb continued. He sat his dun gelding with the ease of a man who'd spent more years in a saddle than in a chair. White scars crisscrossed the horse's shoulders, barbed wire, from the look of them. Ears back. They're annoyed. Tail switching fast. They're about to kick. Bellowing steady means they're calling for a calf. You'll learn. She nodded again. Didn't speak. Her hands gripped the reins tighter than they needed to. They moved the herd north as the sun climbed. 80 head of cattle made their own weather dust rising in a constant haze. The sound of hooves on hardpan like distant thunder that never stopped. Clara rode where Caleb pointed. She watched the red brindle. When it started to drift, she urged her mare forward, cutting it off before it could bolt. By noon, the reins had rubbed her palms raw. She felt the sting every time she adjusted her grip. But she didn't complain. Didn't ask to stop. Just kept riding. They rested during the worst heat. Caleb dismounted, loosened his horse's cinch. Clara did the same. Her hands shook as she worked the leather strap. The mare stood patient while Clara fumbled with buckles she couldn't quite feel anymore. At 3, they resumed. The herd moved slower in the afternoon, heads low, tongues out. Clara's back ached from the constant motion of the saddle. Her thighs burned. She'd forgotten how much riding hurt when you weren't used to it. Then the heifer started lowing. It was a different sound than the others, higher, insistent. The cow stopped walking. The herd flowed around her like water around a stone. Caleb reined in, turned his horse. "She's calving," he said it flat, stating fact. Clara watched the heifer's sides contract. The cow's tail lifted. Something dark emerged, glistening wet in the afternoon sun. The heifer lowed again, deeper this time. The calf came in a rush, front hooves first, then nose, then the rest in a slick slide onto the dirt. It lay there, not moving. The membrane still covered its face. The heifer turned, lowing, licking at the calf's head. The membrane broke. The calf's ribs moved, once, twice, but it didn't lift its head. Caleb dismounted, walked to the calf, knelt, put his hand on its neck. Waited. "Too weak," he said. He stood. "We can't stop. Schedule's tight. Rail station won't wait." Clara stared at the calf. Its eyes were open but unfocused. Its legs splayed out wrong, like it couldn't figure out which way was up. "It'll die anyway," Caleb said. He wasn't being cruel, just practical. "Happens sometimes." "No." The word came out before Clara could think it through. Caleb looked at her. "I'll carry it," she said. He frowned. "It weighs 60 pounds, and we've got 2 miles before we stop." "I'll carry it." She dismounted before he could argue. Her legs nearly buckled when she hit the ground. Hours in the saddle made them feel like somebody else's legs. She knelt beside the calf, slid her arms under its body, lifted. The calf was heavier than she expected, dense, all bone and wet hide, its heating head lolled against her chest. She straightened, staggered, caught her balance. Caleb didn't help, didn't offer, just watched. Clara wrapped her shawl around the calf's body, tied it across her shoulders like a sling. The calf's knobby legs dangled against her skirt. She took her mare's reins in one hand, started walking. The herd moved on. The heifer followed. Lowing, but she followed. Clara's arms burned within the first 100 yards. The calf's weight pressed against her chest, making each breath shallow. Wet ran down her back. The sun beat on her shoulders. Dust coated her throat. She kept walking. Her mare plodded beside her. Patient. Clara focused on the horse's hooves. One step, another. The ground passed beneath them. The calf's breathing came ragged against her collarbone. She could feel each inhale, each exhale. At a half-mile, her arms started shaking. At a mile, she couldn't feel them anymore. Just weight. Just the calf's heart beating against her ribs. The calf shifted, lifted its head, made a sound half bleat, half bawl. Almost there, Clara whispered. Stay with me. At 2 miles, Caleb stopped the herd. Clara set the calf down in the shade of a scraggly mesquite. The heifer pushed past her, nosing the calf, licking it clean. The calf struggled, got its front legs under it. Pushed. Fell, right again. This time it stood, shaking, wobbling, but standing. It found the heifer's udder on the 3rd try, latched on, nursed. Clara sat in the dirt. Her arms hung useless at her sides. Her hands were raw, not just from the reins now, but from where the shawl had rubbed them while she walked. Blood seeped through cracked skin. She pulled a strip of fabric from her petticoat. White cotton, hand-stitched hem, wrapped it around her right palm. Then her left. Caleb watched from his horse. His hand rested on the saddle horn. His face gave nothing away. That evening, when he divided the jerky, her piece was bigger than his. He didn't say anything. She didn't thank him. But something had shifted between them, small as the difference between 2 pieces of dried meat, and just as real. The calf survived the night. And in the morning, when they broke camp, Clara realized she'd stopped thinking about what the town said about her. The days found their rhythm in the 2nd week. Coffee before dawn. Caleb's blue granite pot blackened and dented. Cornbread baked the night before. Hard enough to break teeth if you weren't careful. Clara learned to dunk hers in the coffee. It softened that way. Became edible. They drove the herd north until noon. When the sun turned the air thick as wet wool, stopped, loosened cinches, let the cattle rest in whatever shade they could find. At 3, they started again, pushing until dusk painted the sky red and orange and purple, all at once. Caleb spoke maybe 10 words a day, 12 if the cattle were difficult. But Clara learned his language anyway. When he shifted his weight in the saddle and looked left, she knew to check that side of the herd. When he tilted his head toward the water barrel strapped to the pack mule, she knew to fill canteens. When he dismounted and walked a slow circle around the herd at night, counting under his breath, she did the same from the opposite side. She learned which cattle had names, not many. Just the troublemakers. Red Brindle. Stubborn Sue. The bull he called Old Moses, because it had a habit of leading the others astray. She learned that the dun-gelding Caleb rode was named Dust, and that he talked to the horse in a low, constant murmur. She couldn't quite hear, but could feel, like thunder too far away to count. He never talked to her that way. By the 4th day, Clara had stopped braiding her hair the way her mother taught her, pretty loops pinned at the crown, tendrils framing her face. Now she pulled it back tight, plaited it straight down, tied it with a strip of rawhide Caleb left by the coffee pot one morning. No note, no explanation, just the rawhide. She used it. On the 5th day, her dress caught on barbed wire. They'd stopped to fix a broken hobble. Clara knelt beside one of the pack mules, untangling rope. When she stood too fast, the wire fencing half buried in the dirt, left over from some abandoned homestead, snagged her skirt. Fabric tore. A long rip up the side seam, from hem to hip. She stared at it. The dress was dove-gray calico, high collar, the only one she owned now. Her hands went to the tear, trying to hold it closed, but the damage was done. Caleb glanced over, looked at the rip, looked away. "Wait here," he said. He went to his saddlebags, pulled out a bundle of brown canvas, unfolded it. Trousers, men's work pants, worn soft at the knees, patched at one thigh. He held them out to her. "They'll fit better than a skirt on horseback." Clara took them. The fabric was warm from being packed against the horse. She could smell wood smoke and sweat not unpleasant. Just lived in. "Thank you." He'd already turned back to the mule. That evening, Clara wore the trousers. She'd rolled the cuffs 3 times and cinched the waist with her own belt, but they stayed up. The freedom of it startled her, being able to move without fabric tangling between her legs, without worrying about modesty or propriety, or what people would say if they saw her dressed like a man. Nobody saw her but Caleb and 80 head of cattle. She didn't apologize for wearing them. He didn't comment. On the 7th night, Clara noticed Caleb's shirt. They'd made camp in a low spot with actual grass, rare enough that the cattle settled fast. Caleb built the fire. Clara unpacked the Dutch oven for biscuits. She glanced at him as he crouched by the flames, adding mesquite branch by branch. His shirt, the blue chambray he wore every day, had torn at the shoulder seam. The fabric gaped open, showing sunburned skin beneath. The collar was worn through on both sides. Threads dangled. After they ate, after Caleb walked his evening circle around the herd, Clara pulled her sewing kit from her carpetbag: bone needle, waxed thread, thimble in a dented tin that rattled when she opened it. "Give me your shirt," she said. Caleb looked up from where he sat checking his saddle girth. "What?" "Your shirt. It's torn." He glanced down at his shoulder, frowned. "It's fine." "It's not fine. It'll tear worse. Give it here." He hesitated, then pulled the shirt over his head. Clara took it, sat cross-legged by the fire. The fabric was softer than she expected, worn thin from years of use and washing. She threaded the needle by firelight. It took 3 tries, her eyes watering from smoke. Then she started stitching. The tear at the shoulder first. Small, tight stitches the way her mother taught her. Then the collar. She folded the raw edges under, reinforced them. Her needle flashed in the firelight, catching orange and gold with each pass. Caleb stood at the edge of camp. He'd pulled on his spare shirt another chambray, this one gray. He wasn't looking at the sunset anymore, though it painted the whole sky the color of ripe peaches. He was looking at her. Clara felt his gaze, didn't acknowledge it, just kept stitching. When she finished, she knotted the thread, bit it off with her teeth, held up the shirt. The repairs were visible white thread against blue fabric, but they'd hold. "Here." Caleb took it, ran his thumb over the stitching at the collar, "Thank you," he said. Clara nodded, put her sewing kit away. The next morning, Caleb sharpened her knife. Clara hadn't asked, hadn't mentioned that the blade had dulled from cutting hobbles every night. But when she woke, her knife lay on a flat stone by the dead fire. The edge gleamed. She picked it up, tested it against her thumbnail, sharp enough to shave with. Caleb's whetstone sat beside it. Arkansas stone in an oiled leather pouch. He was already up, saddling dust. Didn't turn around. Clara slipped the knife back in its sheath, put the whetstone by his saddlebags. No words exchanged. None needed. The pattern held through the second week. Work. Silence. Small acts of care that neither of them named or acknowledged. Clara mended a split seam in his saddlebag. Caleb started pouring her coffee before she woke. Leaving it by her bedroll where the tin cup wouldn't tip, she began packing his pipe for him at night. He never asked. But his tobacco pouch appeared by her elbow one evening, and after that it became routine. They still barely spoke. But the silence changed. It wasn't awkward anymore, wasn't tense. It was just there, comfortable, like an old quilt that had been washed so many times the fabric went soft. On the 13th night, Caleb asked the question. They'd finished eating. Clara was scrubbing the skillet with sand and a rag. Caleb sat by the fire, his pipe going, smoke drifting up into the darkening sky. The cattle were quiet. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped high and lonesome. "What would you have done?" Caleb said. "If I'd said no that night." Clara's hand stopped moving. She set the skillet down, looked at him across the fire. His face was half in shadow. The pipe glowed orange when he drew on it. She thought about lying, about saying she would have found another ranch, another town, another way, but the truth sat heavy in her chest, and she was tired of carrying things she didn't have to carry anymore. "Kept walking," she said. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Sparks rose and died. "Where to?" "Didn't matter." Clara picked up the skillet again, started scrubbing. "Just away." "Until what?" She didn't answer right away. The sand scraped against iron. Her hands moved in small circles. "Until I couldn't walk anymore, I guess." Caleb pulled the pipe from his mouth, tapped it against a rock. Ash scattered. "I believe you," he said. Clara looked up. He was watching her now. Not the fire, but at the horizon. Her. Something in his expression made her throat tight. She went back to scrubbing the skillet, but her hands shook. Just a little. Enough that the iron rattled against the rock she was using as a table. Caleb stood, walked to his bedroll, lay down with his back to the fire. Clara finished cleaning, put everything away, banked the coals, crawled into her own bedroll 20 feet from his. The stars wheeled overhead. The cattle breathed in the darkness, and somewhere between waking and sleeping, Clara realized she hadn't thought about the town, about the wedding that didn't happen, about the whispers and the locked door and the shame in 3 days, maybe longer. She'd been too busy working to remember to feel ruined. The calf Clara saved was thriving by the 3rd week. It followed its mother with the awkward gait of young things learning their legs, butted at the heifer's udder with increasing confidence. When the herd moved, it stayed close to Clara's mare, trotting alongside like it knew who'd carried it those first desperate miles. But another calf was dying. Clara noticed it on the morning they crossed into harder country, less grass, more alkali crusting the ground in white patches. A cow stood apart from the herd, lowing, low and constant. The sound cattle make when something's wrong. At her feet, a calf lay curled tight. Small. Too small. Its ribs showed through damp hide. When Clara dismounted and walked closer, the calf didn't lift its head. Its eyes were open but filmed over, like something already halfway gone. Mother rejected it, Caleb said. He'd ridden up behind her, Dust's hooves crunching on the dry earth. Born too small, sometimes they just don't take to them. Clara knelt. Put her hand on the calf's neck. The heartbeat under her palm felt weak, irregular. Won't nurse, won't even try. Caleb dismounted, stood looking down at the calf with his hands on his belt. Best to cull it now. Kinder than letting it starve over 3 days. Clara's jaw tightened. She stood, faced him. No. Caleb's eyebrows went up, just slightly. Clara. No. She said it again, and louder. I'll feed it. You can't carry another one. We're making good time, and the weather's... I'll bottle feed it. Caleb was quiet. He looked at the calf, at Clara, at the herd spreading out across the plain, already moving north without them. You'll have to milk a cow by hand, he said finally. 3 times a day, and they kick. You know that. I know. One good kick can crack your skull. I know. He studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod once. Sharp. Your calf, he said. Your responsibility. Clara turned back to the dying animal at her feet. She had no bottle, no rubber nipple. But Caleb had a leather flask for whiskey he never drank. He dumped it out, rinsed it with water from the barrel, cut a small hole in a piece of canvas, tied it over the mouth with twine. It would leak, but it might work. The milk was the harder part. Clara chose a cow that looked patient, a big red heifer with calm eyes. She approached slow, talking low the way she'd heard Caleb talk to Dust. The cow watched her come, didn't bolt. Clara knelt in the dirt beside it. The udder was warm under her hands. Swollen with milk, the cow's own calf had already nursed. Clara wrapped her fingers around one teat, the way her mother taught her a lifetime ago. Pulled down, squeezed, nothing. She tried again. Her hands cramped. The cow shifted weight, and Clara froze if it kicked now. She'd never see it coming. But the cow just flicked its tail and stood still. On the 3rd try, milk came, thin and warm, hissing into the flask. Clara worked both hands, alternating teats, until she had maybe half a cup. Her forearms burned. Sweat ran into her eyes. The cow turned its head, looked at her with something that might have been irritation or might have been boredom. Clara stood slowly, backed away. The calf was where she'd left it, still breathing, barely. Clara knelt, lifted its head into her lap, pressed the canvas-covered flask to its mouth. Milk dribbled out, ran down its chin. The calf didn't respond. Come on, Clara whispered. Just try. She squeezed the flask gently. Milk flooded the calf's mouth. It coughed, choked. Then its tongue moved just once, reflexive. It swallowed. Clara squeezed again. This time the calf latched on, weak, uncertain, but sucking. The flask emptied in less than a minute. The calf's eyes closed. Its breathing evened out. Clara sat in the dirt, calf in her lap, until Caleb called that they were moving. 3 times a day, Clara milked the red cow. Dawn, noon, dusk, each time. The cow stood patient while Clara knelt vulnerable, and the herd grazed around them. Each time. Clara's hands cramped and her back ached, and she wondered if this time would be the time the cow decided to kick. It never did. The calf drank, slow at first, reluctant. But by the second day, it recognized the flask, the smell of milk. By the third day, it bleated when Clara approached a thin, reedy sound. But a sound. Caleb watched. He never helped, never offered advice, just watched from his horse or from across the fire while Clara worked. His face gave nothing away. On the fourth day, the calf stood when Clara came near, wobbly. Its legs splayed out like it still couldn't quite figure out balance, but standing. On the seventh day, it ran, not far, just a short burst calf joy. Spring-legged and graceless, it bucked once, kicked its back legs out, then trotted back to Clara like it had surprised itself. That night, Caleb marked the calf's ear with his knife, a small notch on the left side. "Your calf, Naka," he said. Then he walked away before Clara could respond. They camped in a draw that night, a dry creek bed with cottonwoods lining both sides. The first real trees they'd seen in days. The cattle settled fast in the shelter. Clara built the fire while Caleb unsaddled the horses. The routine was smooth now, practiced. They ate beans and salt pork, biscuits from the Dutch oven. Caleb didn't talk through the meal, but afterward, instead of walking his circuit, he stayed by the fire, poured himself more coffee, sat staring at the flames. Clara cleaned the skillet, put everything away, was reaching for her bedroll when Caleb spoke. "My wife died 3 years ago." Clara's hand stopped. She turned. Caleb wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the fire, his coffee cup held loose in both hands. "Childbirth," he said. The word came out flat, empty of everything but fact. "The baby, he didn't make it either. Stillborn." Clara lowered herself back down, sat across from him. The fire crackled between them. "There's a cottonwood on my land," Caleb continued. "2 graves under it. I put crosses up, carved their names myself." He paused. His jaw worked. "Sarah, and the boy. We never named him. Didn't seem right to name something that never breathed." The night sounds filled the silence. Cattle breathing and wind in the cottonwoods. Somewhere far off, a coyote. "I haven't said her name out loud in 3 years, Caleb said. He was still staring at the fire. Or thought about him, about what he might have. He stopped, swallowed. "I just worked. Worked until I was too tired to think, too tired to feel anything." Clara watched him. The firelight played across his face, deepening the lines around his eyes and mouth. He looked older suddenly, or maybe just tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. "Then you showed up," he said, "carrying that calf, and I watched you feed that runt every day for a week. Watched you risk getting your head kicked in 3 times a day just to keep something alive that probably should have died. And I thought..." He finally looked at her. "I thought maybe I remembered something. About what it was like. Before." Clara's throat was tight. She didn't trust her voice. "Before what?" she managed. "Before I stopped believing things could live if you just tried hard enough." The fire popped. Sparks rose and died. Caleb set his coffee cup down, stood. That calf, ye wouldn't have made it without you. Clara stood too. It wanted to live. Wanting's not enough. Caleb looked at her fully now. Sometimes wanting's not anywhere close to enough, but you gave it more than wanting. You gave it a chance. He walked to his bedroll, lay down, pulled his blanket up. Clara stood by the fire alone. The words he'd spoken hung in the air like smoke, substantial but shapeless. She'd heard what he said, but she'd also heard what he didn't say. The calf wouldn't have made it without you. And maybe neither would I. She banked the fire, crawled into her own bedroll, lay staring at stars she couldn't name, somewhere in the darkness. The calf she'd saved bleated softly. Its mother answered. And Clara realized with a jolt that ran through her whole body, she'd just heard a man talk about his dead wife and his stillborn son. And instead of offering meaningless comfort or backing away from his grief, she'd simply stayed. She'd stayed, and he'd let her. The question that kept her awake until the stars started fading wasn't about the calf anymore. It was what happens when two people who've spent years learning how to be alone suddenly aren't. The storm came without warning on their 23rd night. Clara woke to electricity in the air, that sharp ozone smell that made her teeth ache. The sky flickered. Not clouds, just light, white and jagged, branching across the darkness like tree roots growing upside down. No thunder. That was the first thing wrong. She sat up. The cattle were awake too, all of them, standing instead of lying down. Their heads turned toward the lightning, ears forward, bodies tense. Clara. Caleb's voice came low and urgent from across the dead fire. Get your horse, now. She didn't ask why, just pulled on her boots and ran for her mare. The horse was already spooked whites showing around its eyes, nostrils flared. Clara grabbed the bridle from where it hung on a mesquite branch. The mare tossed its head when Clara tried to slip the bit in. Tossed again. Easy, Clara whispered. Her hand shook. Easy. The bit went in on the third try. She didn't bother with the saddle. Just grabbed mane and swung up bareback. The sky lit up again. Closer this time. The lightning forked and forked again, turning night into noon for 3 heartbeats. The cattle bolted. 80 head moving as one, a wave of muscle and horn and panic. They didn't run in any direction that made sense. Just away from the light, away from the smell of burned air, away from whatever instinct told them was coming. Clara kicked her mare hard. The horse lunged forward. She leaned low over its neck, gripping with her knees, one hand twisted in mane. The world narrowed to movement, and sound hooves pounding, cattle bellowing, her own breath coming fast and shallow. She couldn't see Caleb, couldn't see anything but shapes in the darkness between lightning strikes. Dark shapes running, dark ground rushing beneath her, dark sky above pressing down like a hand. A cow veered left. Clara followed, cut it off before it could split farther from the main herd. The mare was good at this better than Clara. It knew where to be, how to move. Clara just held on. Another lightning strike. This one so close, Clara felt the heat of it, smelled burning sage. The cattle scattered wider, groups of 3, groups of 5, breaking apart like somebody had thrown a stone into a pool of water. Clara went after a group of 4, pushed them back toward where she thought the main herd might be. But the main herd wasn't there anymore. Just more darkness, more scattered cattle, more lightning turning everything white and black and white again. Her mare stumbled. Not bad. just a hoof catching on something, a rock, a hole. Clara couldn't tell. The horse recovered, kept running. But Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She didn't know how long they ran. Time stretched out and compressed and stretched again. Could have been an hour. Could have been 10 minutes. The lightning kept coming. No rain, no thunder, just light and the smell of ozone and electricity crawling across her skin. Then her hat blew off. She felt it go, the wind catching the brim, lifting it right off her head. Her hair came loose from its braid, whipped across her face. She couldn't see, couldn't spare a hand to pull it back. Just kept riding, half blind, trusting the mare to avoid whatever needed avoiding. A cow appeared out of the darkness directly in front of them. The mare veered hard left. Clara's grip slipped. She caught herself, fingers digging into mane, legs clamping tighter. But for one long second she was falling, tilting. The ground rushing up, the mare steadied. Clara gasped, held on. She found 2 more cows, pushed them east, or what she hoped was east. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges. Not much, just a graying of the black. Dawn coming whether anyone wanted it or not. Clara's mare was lathered. Foam at the bit, foam on its neck. The horse's sides heaved, but it kept moving, kept following Clara's cues, even though every muscle must be screaming. As the light grew, Clara started to see what the night had done. Cattle scattered across the plain for what looked like miles, some in groups, some alone, most just standing now, sides heaving, too tired to run anymore. And in the middle distance, a rider, Caleb on dust, moving slow, gathering strays. Clara turned her mare toward him. It took until full dawn to find them all, or most of them. Caleb and Clara worked in a spiral, starting wide and moving in, pushing cattle toward a central point near where their camp had been. The pack mule was still there, hobbled and terrified, but there. The spare horses, the wagon with their supplies, but not all the cattle. Caleb counted. Clara watched his lips move, watched him point at different animals. Count again. His face went hard. 73, he said. Clara's stomach dropped. 7 missing, 7 missing. He pulled his small leather-bound book from his saddlebag, flipped it open, wrote numbers with a pencil stub worn down to almost nothing. 7 head at $20 each. That's $140. He said it flat. Empty, like he was reading from a ledger instead of watching 3 months of profit disappear into the morning light. That's... Clara's throat was dry. She swallowed. That's a lot. That's everything. Caleb closed the book, put it away. That's what I was going to use to hire help this winter. Fix the barn roof, buy seed for spring planting. He just sat there on dust. The horse stood patient, head down. Too tired to do anything but breathe. Caleb's shoulders were slumped, not defeated exactly. Just empty, like somebody had taken everything that held him upright and pulled it out. Clara dismounted. Her legs nearly buckled when she hit the ground. She grabbed her mare's mane, held on until the world steadied. Then she walked to where Caleb sat. She put her hand on his boot. He looked down at her. His eyes were bloodshot. Dust caked his face everywhere. Sweat hadn't cut clean lines through it. We saved 73, my lad. Caleb stared at her. We saved 73, she repeated. That's 73 that could have scattered so far we'd never find them. 73 that could have run off a cliff or broken legs or gotten torn up in the dark. But they didn't, because we rode all night and brought them back. 7 are still gone. I know. Clara's hand tightened on his boot. But 73 aren't. Caleb looked away, toward the horizon, where the sun was climbing, turning the sky from gray to gold. The light hit his face, showed every line, every shadow under his eyes. You still here? He said quietly. Clara frowned. What? You're still here? You could have run last night in the dark, taken your wages and just gone. Nobody would have blamed you. Where would I go? Anywhere. Caleb looked at her again. There's a town about 10 miles west. You could have made it by dawn, caught a stage, been halfway to anywhere by now. Clara stepped back, let go of his boot. Something in her chest went tight and hot. You think I'd leave? Her voice came out harder than she meant it to. In the middle of the night, in a storm, just take the money and run. I'm saying you could have... Well, I didn't. Clara turned, started walking toward her mare. Her hands were shaking. Anger or exhaustion, or something she couldn't name. And I'm not going to... Clara, I'm here until Hayes. She spun back around. I said I'd do the work. I'm doing the work. You think losing 7 head of cattle is enough to make me quit? Caleb's jaw tightened. I think you don't owe me anything. I think you've worked harder than any hand I've ever hired. And I think if you want to leave, you've earned that right. I don't want to leave. The words came out too fast, too loud. Clara's breath caught. Caleb stared at her. The morning light was behind him now, turning him into a silhouette. She couldn't see his face clearly, couldn't read his expression. All right, he said finally. All right. All right. He dismounted, on there with Dust's reins in one hand, swaying slightly. We'll rest the horses, eat something. Then we keep moving. Clara nodded. Her hands were still shaking. They made camp in silence, built a fire, ate jerky and hardtack because neither of them had the energy to cook. The cattle grazed nearby, too tired to wander. Clara's mare stood with its head down, hip cocked, already half asleep. Clara sat on the ground. Her whole body ached. Her thighs were rubbed raw from riding bareback. Her hands were cramped from gripping mane. Her face felt sunburned even though the sun had barely risen. But she wasn't leaving. The realization sat in her chest like a stone, heavy, solid. She wasn't leaving because she needed the money, though she did. She wasn't staying because she had nowhere else to go, though that was true too. She was staying because when Caleb asked, "You still here?" with that note of surprise in his voice, like he couldn't quite believe she hadn't abandoned him. Something in her chest had cracked open. He'd expected her to leave, and she'd realized, with a clarity that made her hands shake and her throat tight, that she couldn't imagine leaving. Not now. Not when they were this close to Hayes. Not when she'd fed his cattle and mended his shirts and learned the shape of his silence. Not when he'd shown her his grief and trusted her to simply stay. Caleb lay down on his bedroll without taking his boots off. Fell asleep in seconds. Clara stayed by the fire, watched the sun climb higher, counted the 73 head of cattle grazing on the plain. 7 were missing. $140 gone. But they'd saved 73. And Clara realized that somewhere in the last 3 weeks, she'd stopped thinking of this as Caleb's herd and started thinking of it as theirs. The question now wasn't whether she'd stay. It was what staying meant. The town appeared on the horizon 3 days after the storm. Not much of a town, just a cluster of buildings breaking the flatness, a general store, a church with a crooked steeple, 2 saloons, maybe a dozen houses scattered around like somebody had dropped them and they'd landed wherever. But it had what they needed, supplies, and Clara's boots were falling apart. The soles had separated from the uppers on both sides. She'd been walking on bare ground for the last 2 days, feeling every rock through the gap. Her feet were blistered, bleeding in places. She needed new boots before they reached Hayes, or she'd arrive barefoot. Caleb gave her money from his saddlebag, $4 silver, didn't count it out or make a show of it, just handed it to her. "Get what you need," he said. "I'll water the horses and restock the coffee." Clara took the money. The coins were warm from being against the horse. She slipped them in her pocket and walked toward the general store while Caleb led the horses to the trough. The store smelled like pickles and kerosene, sawdust on the floor, shelves stacked with canned goods and bolts of fabric and tools, whose purposes Clara couldn't guess. A woman stood behind the counter, middle-aged, hair in a tight bun, apron tied so snug it looked like it was holding her together. The woman's eyes went to Clara's trousers first, then her face, then back to the trousers. "Help you." The woman's voice was flat, not friendly, not unfriendly, just assessing. "I need boots," Clara said. She walked to the counter. Her feet left dusty prints on the clean floor. "Men's work boots. Size 7 if you have them." The woman didn't move, just kept staring. "You traveling with that man?" She nodded toward the window, through the glass. Caleb was visible at the trough, his back to them. Clara's stomach tightened. "I work for him." "Work." The woman repeated the word like it was something foreign. Her mouth pursed. "I see." The air in the store changed, got thicker. Clara felt it press against her skin. "The boots," Clara said again. "Do you have them or not?" The woman turned, walked to a shelf, pulled down a pair of brown leather boots, men's, heavy-soled, larger than Clara needed, but close enough. She set them on the counter with more force than necessary. They made a hard thump against the wood. $3. Clara pulled out the coins, set them on the counter. The woman swept them up fast, like she was afraid they might be contaminated. Clara picked up the boots, started to leave. "Must be nice," the woman said. Clara stopped, turned. The woman was watching her with eyes that had gone hard and small. Must be nice. Traveling alone with a man, no chaperone, no family. Wearing trousers like that. She gestured at Clara's clothes. "Decent women don't." "Thank you for the boots," Clara said. Her voice came out steady, flat. She walked to the door. Behind her, the woman made a sound. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a snort. Just dismissal. The sound you make when you've confirmed what you already suspected about someone. Clara's hand was on the door handle when she heard it. "Shameful," the woman said, loud enough to carry and loud enough to make sure Clara heard. "Absolutely shameful." Clara walked out. The door slammed behind her. Her hands were shaking. The boots felt heavy, too heavy. She walked to where Caleb was tying off the horses, her vision blurring at the edges. "Got them." Caleb glanced at the boots. Clara nodded. Didn't trust her voice. "Good." He swung up onto dust. "Let's get back to the herd." They rode in silence. Clara put the new boots on once they were out of sight of the town. They were too big, her feet swam in them, but she stuffed the toes with strips torn from an old flour sack, and they stayed on well enough. The boots weren't the problem. The problem was the word echoing in her head, over and over, like a church bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Shameful. That night, Clara couldn't eat. Caleb had shot a rabbit, the first fresh meat in 2 weeks. He'd skinned it and roasted it over the fire, the fat dripping and hissing on the coals. The smell should have made her mouth water. Instead, her stomach churned. She sat across from him, staring at the flames, her plate untouched on the ground beside her. "You all right?" Caleb asked. Clara nodded. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What happened in town?" "Nothing." "Clara." "Nothing happened." Her voice came out sharper than she meant. "I got boots, and that's all." Caleb set down his plate, waited. Clara's hands twisted in her lap. The fabric of his trousers felt rough under her palms. She'd worn them for over a week now. Hadn't thought anything of it. Just practical. Just easier for the work. But the woman in the store had looked at her like she was something unclean. "The shopkeeper's wife," Clara said finally. Her voice sounded strange, distant. "She asked if I was traveling with you. I said I worked for you. And she said—" Clara's throat closed. She had to force the words out. "She said, I see, like that. Like she knew exactly what kind of woman I am." Caleb's jaw tightened. "She doesn't know anything about you. She knows enough." Clara stood, paced to the edge of the firelight. "She knows I'm alone with a man, no chaperone, no family, wearing men's clothes, sleeping under the stars." Her voice was rising. She couldn't stop it. "She called me shameful, Caleb, to my face, and she was right." "She wasn't right." "How?" Clara spun around. "How was she not right? Look at me. Look at what I'm doing. I'm ruined. Can't you see that I was already ruined when you found me? No dowry, no husband, thrown out of my room like garbage. But now," she laughed. The sound came out broken. "Now I'm worse. Now I'm the kind of woman who travels alone with men, who wears trousers, who sleeps 20 feet from a man every single night, and doesn't even have the decency to be ashamed." "Stop." Caleb was on his feet. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, put his hands on her shoulders. "Stop." Clara's breath came in gasps. Her eyes burned. "Listen to me," Caleb said. His voice was low, hard. "That woman in town, she doesn't know you. She doesn't know that you carried a calf for 2 miles. She doesn't know that you milk a cow 3 times a day with your bare hands, even though you could get kicked to death doing it. She doesn't know that you rode through a lightning storm in the dark and helped save 73 head of cattle because you're too stubborn to quit. That doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." His grip on her shoulders tightened. "Hell with decent women. Hell with what that town thinks. Now, you're the best hand I've ever had. The best." He paused. His voice dropped lower. "And that matters?" Clara stared at him. His face was inches from hers. She could see the firelight reflected in his eyes. Could smell wood smoke and horse and sweat and something else. Something that made her breath catch. "Caleb," she whispered. His hand slid from her shoulders to her arms. She felt the calluses on his palms through the thin fabric of her shirt. "You're not ruined," he said. "You're—" He didn't finish. Just looked at her. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. Clara's heart was hammering so hard she could hear it, feel it, Her whole body was aware of how close he was, how his fingers pressed into her arms, how easy it would be to close the last few inches between them. She tilted her face up. He leaned down, and from the darkness beyond the firelight came a bleat, high and insistent. The runt calf calling for her. Caleb jerked back like he'd been burned. He dropped his hands, stepped away, turned. "I should check the herd," he said. His voice was rough, unsteady. Clara stood frozen. Her arms felt cold where his hands had been. Her face was hot. Her throat was tight with something that might have been a sob or might have been a scream. And she didn't know which. "Caleb, we have an early start tomorrow." He was already walking away into the darkness, his boots crunching on the dry ground. "You should get some sleep." Then he was gone. Clara stood by the fire alone, and her hands were shaking, not from cold, not from anger, from something else entirely. She'd almost kissed him, or he'd almost kissed her, or they'd almost kissed each other, and the only thing that stopped them was a calf bleating at exactly the wrong moment, or the right moment. Clara didn't know anymore. She sat down hard on the ground, put her face in her hands. Her breath came in short gasps that might have been laughs or might have been sobs. The woman in town was right. Not because Clara was shameful, but because Clara had stopped caring what decent women thought, had stopped caring about propriety or reputation or what people would say. She'd spent 3 weeks working beside a man, wearing his clothes, sleeping under the same stars. And somewhere in those 3 weeks, she'd stopped seeing him as her employer. She'd started seeing him as something else, something that terrified her more than being ruined ever did. Because being ruined meant losing something she'd already lost. But this, whatever this was between them, this was something she'd never had in the first place. And the thought of losing it before she even understood what it was made her want to scream. Clara lay down on her bedroll, pulled the blanket over her head, pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. From somewhere in the darkness, Caleb was making his circuit of the herd. She could hear his boots, his low voice talking to the cattle. He didn't come back to the fire for a long time. And when he finally did, he lay down on his bedroll with his back to her. Neither of them slept. And in the morning, when Clara milked the cow and fed the calf and packed up camp, Caleb didn't meet her eyes, not once. The silence between them now wasn't comfortable anymore. It was a chasm neither of them knew how to cross. The rail stations at Hayes sat at the edge of town like a promise kept. Clara saw the smoke, first black columns rising from locomotive stacks, drifting east across the pale sky. Then the buildings, then the pens, livestock pens stretching out in all directions, full of cattle waiting to be loaded. The smell hit next manure and coal smoke, and the particular stink of hundreds of animals held in tight quarters. Caleb didn't say anything, just pointed the herd toward the holding pens and kept riding. It took 2 hours to get all 73 head counted and penned. The buyers came men in suits too clean for this work, carrying ledgers and pencils, making marks and calculating weights. They argued with Caleb over price. He argued back, low and steady, never raising his voice, just stating facts until the buyers gave in. Clara stayed with the horses, watched from a distance. Her hands rested on her mare's neck. The horse was tired. They all were. 4 weeks on the trail had worn them down to bone and grit, and not much else. When the buyers finally paid, they counted cash onto a barrel top, less than Caleb had hoped. Clara could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his hand paused before reaching for the bills. The 7 head they'd lost in the storm, $140 gone before he'd even reached Hayes. But he didn't let himself think about that now. He counted the money twice, folded the bills, slipped them into his shirt pocket, walked back to where Clara waited. He didn't say anything, just pulled out the money again, counted off bills. His lips moved silently. $28. He folded them separate from the rest, then added 2 more $5 bills from his own pile. $38 total. He held it out to her. Clara stared at the money, more money than she'd ever held at once, more than her father made in 3 months, more than her failed dowry would have been. 4 weeks, Caleb said. Caleb, $1 a day, that's 28, plus 10 for... He paused. His jaw worked. For the calves, for the work you did beyond what I hired you for. Clara took the money. The bills were warm from being against his chest. She held them in both hands like they might blow away. What now? Caleb asked. Clara looked up. He was watching her. Not the money. Her... What do you mean? I mean... He glanced away. Toward the station. Toward the town beyond it. You've got your wages. Could buy a train ticket. Go anywhere. East? Maybe. Start over. Where nobody knows. He didn't finish. Clara folded the bills, tucked them into her pocket. Her hand stayed there, feeling the weight of them through the fabric. Is that what you want? She asked. For me to leave? Caleb's head snapped around. No, that's not... He stopped, ran a hand over his face. I'm saying you could, if you wanted, but you don't want me to. It wasn't a question. Clara said it flat, watching his face. Caleb's throat moved. He looked at her for a long moment, then away again. My ranch is 2 days south of here, he said. The words came out careful, like he'd been practicing them. It's not much. Small operation. Just me and some land and more work than one person can handle, especially come winter. Clara waited. I need help, Caleb continued. He was looking at his boots now, at the dirt, anywhere but at her. Fences to mend, hay to put up, stock to feed through the cold months. I can't pay much. Maybe 50 cents a day plus room and board, but there's a cabin, separate from the main house. Now he paused. For propriety, if you wanted, the work. If you wanted the work. Clara's chest went tight. She could barely breathe around it. You're offering me a job. Yes. At your ranch. Yes. In a separate cabin. Yes. Finally, he looked at her. I know it's not much, and I know you could probably find better work in a town somewhere, with actual people and a real wage and... Yes, Clara said. Caleb stopped, blinked. Yes, I'll take the job. His mouth opened, closed. You don't want to think about it. No. You don't want to see the place first. It's rough. Clara, the main house needs work. The cabin's smaller, 1 room, sod roof. Nothing fancy. I don't need fancy. And the winter out there gets hard, cold, isolated. You'd be, and he gestured vaguely, you'd be stuck for months with me and the stock. I know. Caleb stared at her. Something moved behind his eyes, something that it made Clara's pulse jump. All right, then, he said quietly. All right. They stood there for a moment. The rail station bustled around them. Men shouting, cattle lowing, trains hissing steam, but Clara barely heard any of it, just the sound of her own breathing, and Caleb's. "We'll leave in the morning," he said finally. "2 days' ride. We can take it slow, let the horses rest." Clara nodded. That night they stayed at a boarding house on the edge of town. Separate rooms. First time in 4 weeks, Clara had slept under a roof. The bed was too soft. The walls felt too close. She lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to footsteps in the hall and wondering which ones were Caleb's. In the morning they left Hayes behind. The land south of town was different than the flat plains they'd crossed. Hillier, more trees, actual grass in places instead of just dust and scrub. They rode without talking. The silence between them was still there, that careful distance they'd been maintaining since the almost kiss. But now there was something else underneath it, something that hummed in Clara's chest every time she looked at Caleb's back ahead of her on the trail. They camped that night by a creek, real running water. The sound of it was strange after weeks of silence, broken only by cattle and wind. Clara washed her face, her hands, her feet. The cold water stung the blisters that had finally started to heal. Caleb cooked salt pork and beans. They ate sitting on opposite sides of the fire, not talking, just the clink of spoons against tin and the creek burbling in the background. "Thank you," Clara said finally. Caleb looked up. "For what?" "For," she gestured vaguely, "at the fire, the food, everything. For this, for the job, for letting me stay." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Then you earned it." "I know, but still," he nodded and went back to eating. That night, Clara lay in her bedroll and thought about the separate cabin. One room, sod roof, nothing fancy, but hers. A place that was hers, not borrowed, not given out of charity, but earned through work and blistered hands and nights riding through lightning storms. The thought sat in her chest like warmth. On the second day, they crested a rise in late afternoon, and there it was. The ranch spread out in the valley below them. Small, just like Caleb said. A main house, weathered wood, low-pitched roof, a barn, bigger than the house, with one door hanging crooked. A smaller structure off to the side that must be the cabin. Corrals, a chicken coop. And in the middle of it all, one massive cottonwood tree, 2 wooden crosses beneath it. Clara's throat went tight. The sunset was happening behind them. The sky lit up orange and gold and red colors so bright they didn't look real. The lights stretched their shadows out long across the ground, reaching toward the ranch like they were already home. "It's not much," Caleb said. His voice was rough. Clara couldn't speak. She just looked at the small weathered house, at the barn with its crooked door, at the cottonwood with 2 graves underneath. It was perfect. "The cabin's behind the barn," Caleb continued. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his ranch like he was seeing it through her eyes and finding it wanting. "Roof needs patching. Stove works, but it smokes. Door sticks. I can fix it before winter, but it's perfect," Clara said. Caleb turned. "What?" "It's perfect." Clara looked at him. Really looked at him. At his face backlit by sunset. At his hands holding the reins. At the way he sat his horse like he'd been born in the saddle. All of it. You haven't even seen inside yet. Doesn't matter. Clara, I'll understand if you change your mind. she said. The words came out before she could stop them. About hiring me. About any of this? I know I'm not. I know people will talk about you having a woman working here, about what it looks like. So if you've changed your mind, I haven't changed my mind. Clara's breath caught. Caleb was still looking at her. His expression was, she couldn't read it. Something between fear and hope and something else entirely. I haven't changed my mind, he repeated. Have you? Clara shook her head. No. Then let's go home. He said it simple, easy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she belonged there already. Let's go home. Clara's eyes stung. She blinked hard, nodded. They rode down into the valley. The light was fading now, turning everything soft and golden. The horses knew they were close. They walked faster, ears forward, anticipating rest and grain and familiar ground. As they got closer, Clara could see more details. The main house had a porch. Small, just big enough for 2 chairs. The windows had curtains faded, but there, someone had planted flowers once. They'd gone wild, but they were still there, stubbornly blooming. The barn door wasn't just crooked. It was off one hinge. But the structure itself was solid. Good bones. The cabin, when they finally rode around to see it, was smaller than Clara expected. 1 room, sod roof, thick with grass, single window, stone chimney, but it had a door that closed, and walls that stood, and it was separate from the main house, respectable, proper. Caleb dismounted, tied Dust to a rail, walked to the cabin door. It stuck just like he said. He had to put his shoulder into it before it opened. Dust and stale air puffed out. Clara climbed down from her mare. Her legs ached. Everything ached. But she walked to the cabin door, looked inside, dark. The fading light barely reached through the single window, but she could see a rope bed frame in one corner, a small table, 2 chairs, a wood stove, delvesal built into the wall, a trunk at the foot of the bed. I know it's rough, Caleb started. It's mine. He paused. Yes. Then it's perfect. Caleb looked at her, really looked, like he was trying to understand something written in a language he'd forgotten how to read. I'll help you get settled, he said finally. Then I need to check the stock. Make sure everything's... He gestured vaguely toward the barn. I can help. You've been riding for 2 days. You should rest. So have you. He almost smiled. Almost. Just a twitch at the corner of his mouth that was gone before it fully formed. All right then, he said. Together. They worked until full dark, unsaddling horses, checking fences, counting stock, not many. Just a handful of cattle Caleb had left behind when he drove the herd north. They were fat and lazy from a summer of good grass and no work. They barely looked up when Caleb and Clara walked through. By the time they finished, stars had come out, thick and bright. The same stars they'd slept under for 4 weeks, but somehow different here, somehow more. Clara couldn't finish the thought. They stood in the yard between the main house and the cabin, not quite ready to separate, not quite ready to end the day. Tomorrow, I'll start on your roof, Caleb said. Get it patched before the weather turns. I can help. You'll have your own work. Chickens to tend, garden to put up for winter. The cow needs milking twice a day. I know how to milk a cow. That almost smile again. I know you do. Silence. Long, not uncomfortable, but weighted. Like they were both waiting for something neither could name. Clara, Caleb said finally. His voice was low, rough. About what happened. At the fire. I don't, Clara said quickly. Her heart was pounding. You don't have to. I do. He turned to face her fully. I do have to, because you should know that I... He stopped, struggled, started again. You're not here because I pity you, or because you're convenient, or because I need a hand I can pay half wages to. Clara's breath caught. Then why? Caleb looked at her. Just looked. In the starlight, his face was half shadow. Because you're the first person in 3 years who made me want to stop being alone, he said. The words hung in the air between them. Clara couldn't breathe and couldn't think, could only stare at him and feel something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight since the night she walked away from town, with nothing but a carpetbag and the clothes on her back. Caleb, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I wanted you to know, before you settled in, before you... He gestured at the cabin. In case it changes things. It doesn't change things. No, no. Clara stepped closer. Close enough that she could see his face clearly even in the dark. Close enough that if she wanted, she could reach out and touch him. It just makes them clearer. Caleb's jaw tightened. His hands flexed at his sides like he was stopping himself from reaching for her. What are we doing? Clara, I don't know. This isn't proper. You working here, living here. People will... I don't care what people will say. You should... Why? Clara's voice rose. Why should I care? They already think I'm ruined. They already decided what I am. Why should I live my life trying to prove them wrong when they'll never believe me anyway? Caleb stared at her. I'm tired. Caleb, Clara continued, her voice cracked. I'm tired of being ashamed, tired of apologizing for existing, tired of making myself smaller so other people feel bigger. I don't want to do that anymore. Then what do you want? The question was simple, but Clara knew the answer wasn't. What did she want? She wanted this ranch, this work, this man standing in front of her, looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth something beyond a dowry or a wedding dress or what people thought when they saw her. She wanted to stay, but saying it out loud, naming it, felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and being asked to jump. I want to stop running, Clara said finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. I want to build something instead of just surviving. I want... She stopped, met his eyes. I want this. This. Clara gestured. At the ranch. At him. Whatever this is, whatever it might become, I want it. Caleb was quiet for so long, Clara thought he might send her away after all. Might tell her this was a mistake. That propriety mattered more than whatever was building between them. But instead, he said, then stay. Just that. 2 words. Stay. And Clara realized with a jolt that ran through her entire body, this was the first time anyone had asked her to stay instead of telling her to leave. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll stay. Something in Caleb's expression shifted, softened. He took a breath, let it out slow. Good, he said. Then good night, Clara. Good night. He walked to that main house. didn't look back. The door closed behind him. Clara stood alone in the yard, stars wheeling overhead, her cabin waiting behind her. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that wasn't fear or shame or the need to keep moving before someone decided she'd stayed too long. She felt home. The first week at the ranch, Clara learned the shape of careful. She woke before dawn in her cabin. The walls smelled like earth and old grass from the sod roof. The stove heated slowly. She had to coax it with kindling and patience. When the fire finally caught, she dressed in the dark and walked across the yard to milk the cow. Caleb was always up before her. She'd see lamplight in the main house windows, smell coffee. But he never came out until she'd finished milking. Like he was giving her space, or maybe giving himself space. She wasn't sure anymore. After milking, she fed the chickens, collected eggs, hauled water. The work was different than the trail, smaller, more repetitive. But it was work that mattered. That kept things alive through the day. Around 7, Caleb would open the main house door, stand on the porch, not quite looking at her, but not quite looking away. "Breakfast," he'd say. Just that. One word. And Clara would wash her hands at the pump and follow him inside. The main house was spare. One main room that served as kitchen and living space. A bedroom off the back that Clara never saw inside. The furniture was old but solid, a table. 4 chairs, even though only 2 were ever used. A rocking chair by the cold fireplace. Shelves with a few books. A window facing east that let in morning light. Caleb cooked. Not well. He burned the bacon more often than not. The eggs came out rubbery. The biscuits were hard enough to break teeth. But he tried. And Clara ate what he made without complaint. They sat across from each other at the table, ate in silence. The only sounds were forks and plates, and the occasional creak of the house settling. After breakfast, they worked. Caleb patched the roof on her cabin first, like he promised. Clara handed him tools, held the ladder steady, watched him work. His hands were competent. Sure, he didn't waste motion. When her roof was done, they mended fences, strung new wire, pounded posts. The work was hard and mindless and filled the hours between dawn and dusk. They were polite to each other, excruciatingly polite. "Could you hand me that hammer?" "Yes. Here." "Thank you. You're welcome." Like strangers. Like they hadn't spent 4 weeks learning each other's silences. Like they hadn't almost kissed by firelight. The tension was unbearable. Clara felt it in her shoulders, in the way her hands shook when Caleb stood too close, in the careful space they maintained between them, always an arm's length, always just out of reach. 2 weeks in, on an evening when the sun set early and the air smelled like coming cold, Clara went to the main house for supper. Caleb had made stew, actually made it instead of burning it. The smell of meat and vegetables filled the small space. Clara's stomach growled. They ate, talked about the stock, about whether the chickens needed a new coop before winter. Safe topics. Practical. After eating, Caleb stood, walked to the shelf, pulled down his Bible, leather-bound, gold-edged pages. He'd been reading from it every night. Usually he did it after Clara left, but tonight he just opened it, started reading aloud. Psalms. His voice was low, steady. He didn't look at her while he read, just at the pages. Clara stood to leave, to give him privacy, but something stopped her. The rocking chair. It had a quilt draped over the back. Clara had seen it before, but never really looked. Now she did. The pattern was patchwork. Irregular squares sewn together with small, careful stitches. The fabric was... Clara's breath caught. The fabric was from her carpetbag. The floral pattern, faded pink and green. The same fabric she'd carried out of town that first night. The bag that had torn and worn through weeks on the trail until it finally fell apart completely somewhere near Hayes. She walked to the chair, touched the quilt. The fabric was soft, worn, but unmistakable. Caleb had kept the scraps, had saved them, had found someone to sew them into this, had put it here, on this chair, in his house. Clara's throat went tight. She sat down, slow. The chair creaked. The left runner made a sound like a sigh. Caleb stopped reading, looked up. Clara pulled the quilt into her lap, traced the stitching with one finger. "You kept it," she said. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then, seemed wrong to throw it away. "When did you—" "There's a woman in Hayes, does sewing. I asked her to make something from the scraps. She thought I was crazy, but—" He stopped, closed the Bible. "I thought you might want it. When winter comes." Clara looked at him. He was watching her now. His expression was... She couldn't read it. Something between hopeful and terrified. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, opened the Bible again, started reading. Clara stayed, sat in the rocking chair with the quilt from her old life spread across her lap, listened to Caleb read by lamplight. The kerosene lamp on the table cast a soft yellow glow. The house was warm. The words washed over her poetry and promise and old comfort. It felt like home. Clara started staying after supper most nights after that. Caleb would read. She would sit in the rocking chair with the quilt. Sometimes she mended clothes, sometimes she just listened. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't careful anymore. It was just there. Easy. October bled into November. The days got shorter, colder. Frost appeared on the ground in the mornings. The cattle grew thicker coats. Clara wore a jacket Caleb had given her wool. Too big, but warm. They worked side by side, put up hay for winter, stacked it in the barn until the whole structure smelled like dried grass and summer sun, repaired the hen house, built a new fence around the vegetable garden, even though the vegetables were long since harvested. The work was good, solid, building instead of surviving. One evening in mid-November, they were by the barn. The sun was setting early, 4:30, and already the light was going gold and thin. Caleb was showing Clara where he planned to build a bigger pen come spring. "Here," he said, pointing to a flat area behind the barn. 20 by 30. Big enough for twice the stock we have now, if we can afford it. If the winter's not too hard." Clara nodded, watched him gesture, watched him plan a future that included them both. That assumed she'd still be here in spring, in summer, beyond. "We could bat a gate here," he continued, "and run a fence line out to—" He stopped, mid-sentence, turned to look at her. "Clara?" Just her name. But the way he said it made her pulse jump. "What?" He was quiet for a long moment. The sunset painted his face gold and shadow. His jaw worked like he was trying to find words that didn't exist. "I'm no good at this," he said finally. "At what?" "At—" He gestured vaguely, between them. "At saying things, at knowing what to say, but I need to." I need you to know that I started again. I'd like it if you'd marry me. Clara's breath stopped. Not because you need refuge, Caleb continued quickly. Not because it's proper, or because people will talk less if you're my wife instead of my hired hand, but because His voice dropped. Got rough. Because you're the fire I've been standing at for 3 years. Too scared to warm myself. Too scared to feel anything. And I don't want to be cold anymore. Clara's eyes burned. Her throat was so tight she couldn't speak. You don't have to answer now, Caleb said. You can think about it. You can... Yes. He stopped. Stared at her. What? Yes. Clara's voice cracked. Yes. I'll marry you. You're sure you don't want to? I'm sure. Caleb's expression did something Clara had never seen before. It broke open. All the careful control, all the distance. It just fell away. He reached for her, pulled her close, not kissing, just holding, his arms around her, her face against his chest, his heartbeat loud and fast under her ear. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Clara almost laughed, almost cried. For what? For staying, and they stood there while the sunset faded, while the cold came in, the world turned dark around them, and when they finally pulled apart, Clara's face was wet. Caleb's eyes were red. We should wait, he said. Do it proper, and wait for the circuit preacher in spring. Have a real wedding. If you want, I want. All right then. He smiled, actually smiled. The first real smile she'd seen from him. Spring, spring, Clara agreed, and they walked back to the house together. Not touching, but close, closer than they'd let themselves be in weeks. That night they sat on the porch of the main house, side by side, her hand in his. The stars wheeled overhead, cold enough now that Clara could see her breath. I see you, Caleb said quietly. Clara turned her head. What? I see you. He was looking at their joined hands, at the way her fingers roughened from work, scarred from rope burns fit between his. Not what you lost, not what you were, just you, now. Clara's throat went tight again. I see you too. I know. His thumb moved across her knuckles, slow, deliberate. That's why I asked, from the pen behind the barn. The cow Clara had saved the calf that was now grown sturdy and strong load. The sound carried across the quiet. Clara laughed. Soft and broken. Caleb laughed too. Tomorrow we build, he said. Tomorrow we build, Clara agreed. But tonight they just sat, hands clasped, stars overhead. The future stretching out before them, uncertain and difficult, and theirs. Clara looked at their hands on the railing. Her hand was roughened, scarred, but strong. His hand was weathered. The wedding ring from his first marriage still circled his finger, dull gold, worn thin. He wasn't erasing his past. She wasn't erasing hers. They were just building on it, building something new from what remained. I choose you, Clara whispered. Caleb's hand tightened on hers. I choose you too, and sitting there on the porch in the cold November dark. Clara realized that sometimes the most important question isn't where you're going, or what you've lost, or who you used to be. Sometimes the most important question is simply, will you stay? And sometimes the most important answer is yes. There's something quiet that happens when two people who've learned to be alone find each other in the dark. Not dramatic, not the way stories usually tell it, just a recognition, like seeing your own reflection in water you didn't know was there. Clara and Caleb didn't fix each other. That's not how it works, is it? Some of us carry things that can't be fixed, grief that won't dissolve, shame that won't wash clean, years that won't come back. We carry them because that's what living does to a person. It marks you, changes the shape of you. But maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe sometimes we find someone willing to sit beside us while we carry what we're carrying. Not to take it away, not to make it lighter. Just to be there. To see us clearly and choose to stay anyway. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if there are answers to the kinds of questions Clara and Caleb were asking about worthiness, about starting over, about whether broken things can still build something that lasts. Some questions don't get answered. They just get lived with. And perhaps that's all right. Perhaps we're allowed to rest in the not knowing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying here with me until the end.